He sat motionless, his fingers curled tightly around the thin slip of paper resting in his palm. The ink had smudged slightly where his thumb pressed against it, but the name was still clear, the address precise. David Carter blinked hard, shifting his gaze from the receipt to the massive iron gate looming ahead. It stretched high into the darkness, its bars thick and unyielding, the kind of structure meant to keep the world on the outside looking in. A gust of wind rattled the branches overhead, sending dry leaves tumbling across the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, sharp, quick, then silence. This wasn't like his usual stops. He knew that the second he turned onto this street. The houses were too far apart, the windows too dark, the air too still. He had been doing this job for years, had pulled into hundreds of driveways, knocked on countless doors, but something about this one made his stomach feel tight. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was an awareness, a knowing that he was standing at the edge of something bigger than he understood. He checked the receipt again, though he already knew it by heart. Then his eyes flicked to the total. $42.78. A large pepperoni, extra cheese, 2 bottles of soda. Just a normal order. So why did it feel like something was pressing against his chest? Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was the name, LeBron James. He swallowed, fingers tapping against the steering wheel. There were a few things that could happen when you delivered to a high-profile customer. Sometimes they weren't the ones who answered the door. Sometimes a security guard or assistant handled it. Other times, you barely got a glance before the door shut in your face. But this was different. This was LeBron James, the greatest basketball player of a generation, a global icon, a living legend. And right now, David was about to walk up to his front door holding a pizza box and a crumpled receipt worth less than $50. His breath hitched. The invitation was clear. No security guard, no assistant, no one there to check his name, just an open path leading straight to the front of the house. He put the car in park, but for a moment, he didn't move. His hands remained on the wheel, gripping it just a little too tightly. Then, with a deep breath, he grabbed the pizza box, stepped out into the cold, and walked toward the house. What he didn't know was that this would be the delivery that changed his life forever. David Carter had spent years driving these roads, delivering pizzas to people whose names he'd forget the moment he pulled away from their houses. Some were polite, offering a smile and a few dollars. Others barely acknowledged him, snatching the box and closing the door before he could even mutter, "Have a good night." It didn't matter. He was used to it. This wasn't a job that came with recognition. It was just a means to an end. Enough to keep the lights on, enough to keep his car running so he could do it all over again tomorrow. But tonight was different. The address on the slip of paper wasn't an apartment, numbers scribbled on the back of an old receipt. It wasn't a small suburban home with kids' toys scattered across the lawn. It was an estate, a place surrounded by walls so tall they seemed designed to keep the world out. And the name at the top, it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't someone who would forget him the second the door shut. It was LeBron James. For a moment, he wondered if it was real, if maybe there had been a mistake, maybe a prank, maybe some kid messing around, putting down a random address for a laugh. But the longer he sat there, staring at the iron gate in front of him, the less likely that seemed. This was real. This was happening. His car felt too small here. His clothes, a little more worn than they had earlier. His shoes, scuffed from years of walking the same cracked sidewalks back in his neighborhood, suddenly felt out of place against the pristine gravel of the driveway. He froze. No intercom. No voice on the other end asking who he was. No security guard stepping out from the shadows to check his name. Just an open gate and a quiet invitation. He swallowed, shifting in his seat. Something about it felt strange. Not bad, just different. He had delivered to big houses before, but never like this. Never to someone who could fill an entire stadium just by stepping onto a court. Never to someone whose face was on billboards, magazines, television screens. This was LeBron James. And yet, the place was silent. No cameras flashing. No crowd waiting outside. Just David, his car, and a house so large it barely fit into his rearview mirror. He had done this 1,000 times before. Walk up, ring the doorbell. Wait, tonight should have been no different. And yet, every step toward that house felt like he was walking toward something bigger than a delivery. Something you wouldn't fully understand until it was already happening. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that in just a few minutes, he wouldn't be leaving with just a tip. He'd be leaving with a story he would tell for the rest of his life. He checked it again. Then again. The address was the same. The name was still there. It hadn't changed. LeBron James. His fingers tightened around the wheel. It didn't make sense. Out of all the restaurants in Akron, out of all the delivery drivers working tonight, it had landed on him. It wasn't just another order. It wasn't just another house. This was the home of a man who needed no introduction, a man whose name could fill entire stadiums with nothing more than a whisper. A gust of wind rattled through the trees lining the road, shaking the branches above. He looked up, the leaves dancing under the glow of the streetlights. A strange kind of stillness lingered in the air, the kind that made everything feel heavier than it should. He could feel the warmth of the pizza box against his leg. The job was simple. Step out of the car, walk up the driveway, ring the doorbell, just like he had done 100 times before. And yet, something about this moment made him hesitate. He had delivered to nice houses before. Doctors, lawyers, business owners. He had seen homes with golden gates, circular driveways, cars so expensive they didn't look real. But this wasn't the same. The iron gate in front of him wasn't just for show. It loomed high, solid, unmoving, as if designed to keep the outside world far, far away. No sign of life on the other side. No barking dogs. No music drifting from an open window. No movement in the massive front yard, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges. And then the gate buzzed. A green light flickered on the keypad. A sharp click rang through the quiet night. David's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't pressed anything. He hadn't announced his arrival. The gate had opened on its own. For a brief moment, he thought about leaving. He could turn the car around. Say the system was down, that he couldn't get through, that the order never made it. The idea lingered, curling in the back of his mind, tempting him. But his body moved before his thoughts could catch up. He reached for the pizza box. The warmth of it spread through his fingers, grounding him, pulling him back into the moment. This was just a delivery. That was all. Nothing more. His shoes hit the pavement as he stepped out of the car. The night air wrapped around him, colder than he expected. The house stood ahead, enormous, the windows dark except for a faint glow somewhere deep inside. With each step forward, the silence pressed in heavier. The driveway stretched ahead of him, longer than it looked from the car. Every sound, his footsteps on the pavement, the gentle rustle of leaves, the slow inhale of his own breath felt amplified, filling the space around him. He adjusted his grip on the pizza box. The closer he got, the larger the front door seemed. He could see the faint reflection of himself in the polished wood, his own figure small against the overwhelming size of the entrance. The house gave nothing away. No movement beyond the glass. No sound slipping through the cracks. A single light flickered on above the porch, casting a pale glow over the doorstep. He hesitated for only a second before raising his hand. The doorbell felt colder than it should have. The sound echoed through the silence, deeper than he expected. And then, nothing. No footsteps approaching. No voice calling out. The seconds stretched. His grip tightened around the pizza box. Maybe they hadn't heard. Maybe he had the wrong door. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, rang the doorbell again. Still nothing. Then, just as he was about to take a step back, the door unlocked. The sound was sharp, cutting through the night air. A low mechanical click. Then another. And then the door swung open. David Carter doesn't move, doesn't speak. He just stands there, the pizza box gripped tight in his hands, staring into the face of a man he has only ever seen on television screens, in highlight reels on magazine covers. LeBron isn't dressed like the superstar David expected. No expensive suit, no designer jacket. Just a simple hoodie, a pair of basketball shorts, and socks. He looks comfortable, relaxed, like he had just finished watching a game or winding down after a long day. And then the impossible happens. LeBron James smiles. A casual, easy smile. Like David is just another guy. Like this is just another night. Like there's nothing unusual about a 6'9" NBA legend opening his own front door for a pizza delivery. For a split second, David wonders if he's dreaming. If somehow, in the exhaustion of a long shift, he has fallen asleep in his car, only to wake up in the middle of a story too good to be true. But then LeBron speaks. Hey, man, what's up? Just like that. Like they've met before. Like this is normal. He holds the box out. His voice catches in his throat, but he manages to say the words that come so easily 1,000 times before. Large pepperoni. Extra cheese. LeBron chuckles, takes the box, balances it in one hand, like it weighs nothing. Appreciate you, man. David nods. He has done his part. The job is done. And for the first time since pulling up to the mansion, he starts to breathe again. He turns to go, stepping back toward the driveway, already replaying the moment in his head. This is a story he'll tell forever. The time he delivered pizza to LeBron James. The time he stood face to face with one of the greatest athletes in history and handed him a $10 pizza. But then, just as he reaches the steps, LeBron does something that stops him in his tracks. He pulls out his wallet, flipping through a neat stack of bills. David doesn't think much of it. Maybe a $5 tip, maybe a 10. That's what most people give. Then LeBron pauses, looks up. Hey, man, he says, his voice calm, easy. How much do you usually make in tips a night? David hesitates, shrugs. The question feels strange, out of place. Maybe 20, $30 on a good night. LeBron nods, as if he's thinking, as if those numbers mean something. And then, without another word, he pulls out a check. Not a $20 bill, not a 50, a check. David barely registers a paper as it's handed to him. His fingers close around it automatically. It's only when he glances down that his breath catches in his throat, because on that check, written in clear, bold ink, is a number he has never seen before. $10,000. He doesn't move, doesn't breathe. His mind struggles to make sense of it. $10,000. More than he makes in months. More than his rent. More than his car is worth. More than he has ever held in his hands at one time. His mouth opens, but no words come out. He looks up, searching for some kind of confirmation, some kind of sign that this is real. LeBron is still standing there, smiling, like this is nothing, like this is normal. For real? David finally manages to choke out. LeBron nods. Yeah, man, you work hard. I respect that. Simple as that. No cameras, no audience, no grand speech. Just a quiet moment between two men, one of whom just changed the other's life without expecting anything in return. But it doesn't. It's real. And it's his. He doesn't move. Minutes pass. Maybe longer. He isn't sure. His mind keeps circling the same thought, over and over. This can't be real. But it is. The check is still there. The ink hasn't disappeared. The signature hasn't faded. The amount hasn't changed. $10,000. He blinks hard, trying to pull himself back into the moment, trying to make sense of what just happened. His heart is still pounding. His hands are still shaking. LeBron James had just handed him more money in an instant than he had made in the last 5 months. And it wasn't because David had done anything special. He didn't pull off some incredible feat. He didn't win a contest. He didn't ask for help. It was just kindness, pure, simple, without expectation. He exhales a deep, shaky breath that feels like it's been stuck in his chest for hours. Then, slowly, he shifts the car into gear and pulls away. The mansion shrinks in his rear-view mirror. The open gate slips into darkness. The streets stretch out in front of him, quiet and familiar. But everything feels different now. Everything is different now. He sits at a small kitchen table, the check in front of him, untouched. He still can't believe it. He runs through the numbers in his head. rent, utilities, car repairs, debts that have followed him for years. And then something else. Something he hasn't allowed himself to think about in a long time. A future, not just getting by, not just surviving. Something more. The repairs are done within days. The car runs smoother than it has in years. No more worrying about whether it will break down in the middle of a shift. No more holding his breath every time the check engine light flickers on. For the first time in a long time, he feels like he's moving forward, and then he takes it further. He had always wanted to go back. He had told himself he would, eventually, when the time was right, when the money wasn't so tight. But the right time had never come. Until now. One night, one order, one tip. It changed everything. Not just because of the money, but because of what it meant. Because for the first time in his life, someone saw his effort. Someone recognized his work. Someone told him without words, without speeches, that he was worth more than just getting by. LeBron listens. He nods. Then he leans forward, speaking into the microphone. Man, I was just showing love. Everyone's hustling. Sometimes people just need a little push. 90 seconds. That's how long it took. From the moment he rang the doorbell to the moment he walked back to his car. 90 seconds to go from just another delivery driver to someone with a future he never thought possible. And all because one man, one moment, one simple act of kindness made him believe in something bigger than himself. For the first time in a long time, he feels something he hasn't felt in years. Asterisk. Hope. The check is gone now, deposited, transformed into numbers on a screen. What once felt impossible is now sitting in his bank account, waiting for him to decide what comes next. And for the first time in his life, he isn't thinking about how to make it to the end of the week. He's thinking about the future. He's thinking about what's possible. This isn't just about money. This is about a second chance. A chance to rewrite his story. A chance to prove to himself, to the world, that he is more than just a guy delivering pizzas. That he is capable of more. LeBron didn't have to do it. He didn't have to open his door. He didn't have to ask the question. He didn't have to reach into his wallet and change the course of a stranger's life. But he did. Because sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness. One moment. One decision to say, I see you. I respect you. I believe in you. You never know whose life you might change with a simple act. You never know who's one moment away from a breakthrough. And you never know when the smallest decision, one that seems insignificant at the time, might become the turning point in someone's life. Kindness is powerful. What would you do if you were in David's shoes? Would you have accepted the money? Would you have questioned it? Would you have believed it was real? And more importantly, if you were in LeBron's shoes, would you have given it? Like this video if you believe in everyday heroes. And don't forget to subscribe. We have more stories that will make you believe in the power of human kindness.